Good morning, Pittman Elementary. Today we'll be reading Chapter 6 of Dog Days by Karen English. Harper and the Sticky Fingers. Miss Shelby Ortiz has written open topic on the whiteboard for their morning journal entries. Gavin doesn't know if he really likes open topic. He stares at the words for a minute. Then he looks around. Some kids like him are taking their time. Some, like that girl Nikki, have already dived in. He taps his pencil on the desk. Miss Shelby Ortiz looks over at him and he stops. He opens his journal and puts the date in the upper right corner of the first clean page. Then he stares at that for a while. He could write about Richard forgetting to bring his skateboard to his house before going home, but that would only make him more annoyed. He was supposed to bring it and then stash it in his backyard, but he forgot. Gavin sighs and writes, "Well, I'm back. Nothing new to write about. Here's my new problem. Turns out I only have to walk the dog 30 minutes when I get home. But Aunt Myrtle doesn't even let me get a snack. There she is at the door, ready to shove that horrible little Carlotta in my arms. That must be some kind of child abuse." He stops to think about this. He bets it is child abuse, making a kid starve. Making a kid go into his own money that he's been saving and saving for a new skateboard just to replace some crazy dog toy. The problem is that he knows no one would really think it's abuse. No grown-ups anyway. They would think it's just a way of making him learn a lesson. How come grown-ups never have to learn lessons? It's not fair. He goes back in his journal. Today I'm going to run quick to the pet store and buy Carlotta another toy because I got the real one stolen by this big dog in the park, and I wasn't supposed to even be in the park. I had snuck over there to ride my skateboard but this big guy, a hand comes down on his journal and attempts to pull it right out from under his pencil. "Didn't you hear the teacher?" She said for me to collect the journals. It's that bossy Deja girl. She said pencils down, journals closed. But I thought the journals were collected only once a week. Miss Shelby Ortiz, Deja begins as if she really loves saying the Ortiz part, collects them a couple of times so she can check our spelling and skipped words and stuff and see if we're doing better. But I wasn't finished, Gavin protests. "So, too bad, so sad," she says in a sing-songy voice. She does this little thing with her neck when she said sad. Gavin wonders if she's mad about something or just mean. He watches her add his journal to the stack in her hand. Then she gives him a smile that looks more like a sneer before walking away. He watches her go. What's he ever done to her? At recess, Richard is ball monitor. It's almost as good as Gavin being ball monitor because as soon as they're out on the schoolyard, Richard passes the basketball to Gavin, who dribbles it all the way to the court, doing a really good dribble job and hoping everyone has stopped to notice. Well, he knows they haven't, but he can dream. When he gets there, he tries to do a layup just like he's seen on TV, but the ball doesn't even get up to the basket. It arcs away from the court, and he has to go chasing after it. He hopes no one saw that. Darnell's new friend Harper stops it with his foot. He's definitely getting a reputation for being someone to stay away from, even though he's only been at Carver Elementary a little while, like Gavin. Kids have been saying that Harper repeated third grade, and for some reason, this makes him seem a little bit scary. Probably because he really should be in sixth grade, and that's not even elementary school. That's middle school, a whole different story. Harper just stands there, tall and big and looking stupid with his foot on the basketball. He gives Gavin a menacing smile, reaches down, grabs the ball, and begins to toss it from one palm to the other. Then he begins to dribble it in a circle. Suddenly, he stops and brings the ball to his chest like he's going to shoot it at Gavin. Gavin holds his hands up, hopeful, but Harper only pretends that he's going to let go of the ball. He throws his neck back and laughs really loud. Gavin feels his face heat up. Several of the boys from room 10 have made their way over and they've formed a semicircle around Gavin to watch what's happening. Gavin feels put on the spot as Harper fakes another throw. Without thinking, Gavin puts up his hands to catch. Harper laughs again, and several of Gavin's classmates join in. A few girls have even ambled over to see what's going on. Want it? Harper calls out, now that he has an audience. Come on, get ready. Gavin lets his hands hang. Then he brings them up. If Harper really does throw that basketball, he could get hit hard. And that's not going to feel so good. Harper does a few fakes to the delight of everyone. The laughter grows louder. Gavin's face grows warmer. Harper is in the middle of launching a new fake when suddenly Darnell comes out of nowhere and knocks the ball out of Harper's hand. He passes it to Gavin, who's ready and catches it, surprising himself. Come on, Harper, Darnell says. Quit fooling around. We've got dodgeball this week, and you're wasting time. While Harper seems to be deciding what he'll do, Gavin clutches the ball, feeling out of breath. He tries to calm his breathing. Harper turns on his heel and gallops off to the dodgeball court. Kids who have gathered hoping for a show stand around a bit and then mosey off to their own areas. Why did Darnell have to spoil the fun? Gavin hears a girl from his class named Casey ask this other girl named Ayana. Yeah, that was fun, Ayana agrees. I gotta go to the pet store, Gavin says to Richard as they burst through the front doors after dismissal. For Gavin, this is the freest time of the day. He loves the feeling of his back to school as he takes the front steps 2 at a time. When the school is over, he can do almost anything he wants for a little while. He can walk down Martin and stop by his Uncle Vester's best friend's store for candy, or he can go home and get permission to ride his bike for 30 minutes. He even likes standing at his kitchen counter, putting blobs of grape jelly on his wheat crackers to eat while he does his homework. Now Richard has to spoil it with, don't you have to go straight home to walk that dog? Gavin rolls his eyes. I have to get a new chew toy first. Otherwise, my aunt's going to have a fit, and I'm going to have to hear her say, I'm responsible and a whole bunch of other stuff, and she might even have my mother put me on punishment. I'll go with you, Richard says. So instead of turning towards Ashby, they head to Marin and Pet Mart, the big store that claims it has everything a pet owner could want or need for their beloved four-legged member of the family. Gavin figures if any place will have a toy that looks exactly like Carlotta's Choo Choo, it's Pet Mart. But when they get there, they discover that there's a whole aisle of rubber and rawhide knickknacks and thingamabobs for dogs to chew on. How will they ever find the right one? What about this? Richard asks, holding up a big round thing with what looks like 1,000 rubber tentacles. No, Gavin says, shaking his head. Her Choo Choo doesn't look like that. Her what? My Aunt Myrtle calls it a Choo Choo. It's that white rawhide bone thing with chewed on knotted ends. Richard moves down to one end of the aisle so he can start checking everything in it. Gavin goes to the other end and begins to move slowly in Richard's direction. So many doggy toys. He never knew dogs had such an array of toys devoted to just them. His eyes stop on something that looks a lot like Carlotta's Choo Choo hanging on a shelf hook by a loop of twine. He takes it down and examines it closely. No, it's got little brown speckles on it. It won't do. It wouldn't fool Aunt Myrtle for a second. He looks over at Richard, who is twirling a rope ball on a braided, twisted string. What in the world? Richard's supposed to be helping him. He knows Gavin has a time limit. What is he doing? Then Gavin sees Richard pick up a bag of dog biscuits from a display at the end of the aisle, gazed at him, then sniffed them. He looks like he wants to eat one. Richard, Richard, Gavin hisses, "What are you doing?" Richard looks over at him and grins. "These look good," he says. "Are you crazy? Those are for dogs. Come on, you gotta help me." "Oh yeah," Richard says. Slowly he gets walking back down the aisle towards Gavin, looking closely at the items on the shelves. "What about this?" He holds up a dark beige dog chew. "Wrong color," Gavin says. He checks the big round clock on the store wall. 3:10. Oh no. He imagines Aunt Myrtle checking the clock on the kitchen stove right then. He turns back to the shelves and keeps searching. "What about this?" Gavin sighs and looks at what Richard's holding up. He moves closer. Richard had a hard, rawhide bone that looks a lot like the choo-choo, same color, same size. "Let me see that," he says. Richard hands the bone over to Gavin to examine it. "Could definitely pass for Carlotta's choo-choo. I think this is it," he says. "This one is new, but I bet I can dirty it up. Make it look a lot like the real thing." Gavin looks at Richard with new respect. He knew there was a brain in there somewhere. "Let's go to Mr. D's store for chips," Richard suggests as they pay and leave the store. "I gotta get home, Richard," Gavin says, stuffing the choo-choo into his backpack. "We'll go real quick." "I don't know. Well, we'll be in and out, Gavin. I promise." "We better," Gavin says. They turn towards Ashby. Gavin spots Darnell, Gregory Johnson, and Harper as soon as he and Richard walk into Mr. D's store. I feel of unease comes over him. A feeling of unease comes over him. Because of Harper, he really doesn't want to go near the group, but before Gavin can stop Richard, he calls out, "Hey, what you guys getting?" and makes his way over to his brother. Darnell is looking at the display of chips. Gregory Johnson is scanning the shelves of candy right in front of the register. Harper has disappeared down one of the aisles. "I don't know yet, so you mind?" With the back of his hand, Darnell gently moves Richard, who's blocking his view, out of the way of the chip display. Gavin looks up at the big security mirror that reflects everybody who can't be seen from the cashier register, then glances at Mr. Delvecchio. He's busy ringing up a big chunk candy bar for Gregory. Gavin looks back at the mirror and sees Harper running his fingers over a rack of those cheap toys that break after you've played with them only a couple of times. Water pistols and rubber balls attached to wooden paddles, small plastic cars. He settles on a spiky rubber ball thing. He removes it from the rack, and instead of taking it up to the register, he slips it inside his jacket under his arm. Gavin feels his eyes grow big, real big. He can't look away. Mr. Delvecchio is putting Gregory Johnson's candy bar in a small bag. Gavin watches Harper come down the aisle with his hands in his jacket pockets, whistling. He goes straight up to the counter. Gavin knows why he's got his hands in his pockets. He knows why he's keeping his upper arms pressed to his sides, because his left arm is keeping the toy from falling to the floor. Gavin feels his heart pounding in his chest. He stares at Harper, who's now whistling something that doesn't even sound like a real tune. "What's taking you guys so long?" Harper says to Gregory and Darnell. "I gotta go." Gavin looks at Mr. Delvecchio again. He can't see what Mr. D doesn't know what Harper did. He can see that Mr. D doesn't know what Harper did. For some strange reason, Gavin feels guilty. It's as if he has taken the toy himself. Mr. Delvecchio and his uncle are friends. Harper might as well have stolen from Uncle Vester. Hey, what you know good?" Mr. D says suddenly, turning to Gavin. "What's your uncle up to?" The older boys walk out the door. Mr. Delvecchio rings up Richard's bag of chips and drops the change in his hand. "He's at some kind of conference for barbershop people," Gavin answers quietly. "Tell him I'm waiting to challenge him at dominoes. It's been a while." "Yes, sir," Gavin says. He nudges Richard in the side and nods quickly toward the door. Richard frowns, puzzled. As soon as they get outside, Gavin points at Harper with his hands still in his pockets, sauntering down Fulton with the older boys a half block ahead. That guy's a thief, he whispers. What? Richard follows his pointing finger. Who's a thief? Not my brother. He's never stolen anything in his life. No, not your brother. And not Gregory Johnson either. Gavin squints. I'm talking about Harper. I saw him in that mirror thing that's supposed to make it so a store person can see who's stealing stuff. I saw him put a toy, one of those balls covered with those spiky things in his jacket. In his jacket? Didn't you see how he was walking with his arms all pressed against his body? Yeah, Richard said slowly, like he's not really sure. He stares at Harper now. He still has his hands in his pockets. I bet you he steals all the time, Gavin says. He probably has a whole room full of stolen stuff. They go to the store every day after school, Richard says, nodding slowly like he's a detective. I should tell Mr. D to watch him more closely. I can tell him I heard Harper steals and that he should be really careful when Harper comes in his store, Gavin says. But then what if Mr. D tells Harper that you're the one who told on him? Richard says. Harper's a big guy. I know he's a big guy, Gavin says, annoyed. You don't need to tell me that. So what should he do? Gavin thinks about this all the way home. He gives a wave to Richard when he turns towards his house on Fulton, and Gavin turns towards his house on Willow. Quietly, he makes his way to his backyard, almost tiptoeing as he passes under the kitchen window. He unzips his backpack and takes out the new chew toy. Just then, he hears the kitchen door open. And where have you been, mister? Aunt Myrtle is standing on top of the step with her hands in her hips. Before he turns around to answer, he slips the new chew toy into his jacket. I had something to do after school. It's a lame excuse, but before Aunt Myrtle can think about it too carefully, he adds, but I came as fast as I could after that. Aunt Myrtle looks at him hard. She sighs. Well, you're here now. Stay right there while I get Carlotta. Before she opens the door, she calls over her shoulder, and where on earth is Carlotta's choo-choo? Gavin thinks fast. I think it's in the bushes. He's proud that he's managed not to tell a big lie. After all, he was going to rub it in the dirt by the bushes and leave it there. What is it doing in the bushes? Aunt Myrtle says almost to herself as she heads back into the house. Gavin stoops down to roll the chew toy around in the dirt. When he's finished, he holds it up. It kind of looks like the old choo-choo. Aunt Myrtle is back on the porch with Carlotta in her arms. I certainly wish you told me that thing was in the bushes. She's been whimpering for it all day. Gavin looks at Carlotta. Immediately, she starts yapping as if she's got something, as if she's got some fussing to do at Gavin too. He sighs. How many days of this does he have to endure? 2, just 2. After today, he doesn't know if he'll survive. Let me have the thing, Aunt Myrtle says. Gavin hands it over and watches Aunt Myrtle closely to see if she notices anything. She takes it in her hands and, before giving it to Carlotta, looks at it carefully. She turns it this way and that. Gavin can't tell what she's thinking. She nuzzles Carlotta's nose with it. Carlotta turns her head, drawing back a little. Well, that's a first time, Aunt Myrtle says, putting Carlotta down and handing the leash and a plastic bag to Gavin. I suppose a dog can outgrow a toy too. She shakes her head and she goes back into the house. Gavin realizes he's back, holding his breath, and lets it out with a whoosh. Halfway down the block, dear Carlotta rewards Gavin with a wonderful prize for all his efforts in the grass right next to his neighbor, Mrs. Marvin's rosebush. Well, at least he's got the handy plastic bag, and at least tomorrow is trash day. He only has to lift up Miss Marvin's trash can lid and slip the prize in there. He doesn't have to walk all over the place with that thing in his hand. And everyone knows what that thing is, right, boys and girls? Even though he used a plastic bag, somehow his hand still feels dirty. He can't wait to get home and wash his hands 10 times. That's the end of chapter 6. Tomorrow, chapter 7, Harper's Not Happy. Everyone have a great day.